So this week I got to celebrate on multiple occasions. July 1 is Canada Day. July 4 is Independence Day. And on one level, they celebrate very similar things, the independence of a group of people from the British Empire across the sea. We'll save that for tomorrow. And oddly enough, as I was listening to the anthems of each country, and I was struck by the fact that if you think about the Israeli national anthem, it too grabs a similar theme when it says, Liot am chofshi ba'artzenu, to be a free people in our land. And it sort of made me begin to think about the question of, what does it mean to be a free people? The author of the Israeli national anthem, I think, was thinking on a more global sort of scale. Liot am chofshi ba'artzenu, to be a people who are not harassed and bothered by the world. To have our own Dalet Amot, our own corner of the world where we can be free from oppression and persecution. But that's the macro. On a less macro level, Liot am chofshi ba'artzenu, to be a free people in our land, whether it's the land of Israel, whether it's Canada, whether it's the United States, it means to be able to enjoy the freedoms that the social contract that we have with our country promises. It means to be free out of a sense of oppressiveness, a sense of persecution. And yet, throughout this week, I kept feeling that almost nowhere can we really feel that. Our social contract gives the state a certain monopoly, a certain power to enforce its laws. That's designed to protect us. It's designed to keep us safe. If we disagree with a particular law, we are allowed to protest, to petition the government, to run for office, or engage in any and all sorts of nonviolent activities, with a goal being to change the status quo in a way that we might prefer. If we don't like our elected officials, we have not just an opportunity, but a responsibility and a duty to try and change them through legitimate means. You don't like your representative in Congress? Run against him. Okay, that's a little crazy. But find someone who you think would represent you, and maybe talk to your neighbor, and your neighbor on the other side, and the one down the street and around the corner. We have that potential, that capacity, that power to make change. Oftentimes, we don't feel that sense of urgency, except when it comes to moments of religious coercion, things that touch the very core and fiber of who we are. There's a interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that apparently has lent itself to a certain amount of not such fun joking. As I've been receiving these emails from my colleagues in Israel who are all passing around the same joke. I'm guessing that happens in every field, but this one involves a particular Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in which Rabbi Shmaya says to his students, you should hate haughtiness, people who are arrogant, right? And he's talking about it in the context of government. Now, that's not such a monstrous chiddush, but the funny part enters into, and the fact that in Hebrew, the word that he uses is sna, which sina, hatred, all right? Sna et harabbanut, right? In Mishnaic Hebrew, the term there means haughtiness, arrogance. But if you recognize the term as it's used in the state of Israel today, the Rabbanut is the group who are empowered, generally without the people's consent and without much recourse that the people have, to decide on a spectrum of religious issues that affect life in Israel, including Jewish identity, marriage, not only to whom you can marry, but by whom you can be married, access to the kotel, allocation of resources to your shul, and a myriad of other things that affect life. And so when it says sna et harabbanut, when it says hate the rabbanut, it's kind of taken a little more literally and not in the sense of haughtiness. And I think it is in part because these go to the very fabric issues of life. And we have to ask ourselves, is it possible to be liyot am chofshi ba'artzenu? Is it possible to be free people in our land when in fact so many of the things that define our lives are determined by or outsourced or controlled by those whom we have little effect on and have little petition to? I guess part of why I'm cogitating about this is not just the fact that it's Independence Week all over the place, but because buried, maybe not as deeply as some might like, but I, like you, read the reports this week that there is perhaps some progress in the negotiations between Israel and Hamas that might lead to some resolution that will allow the hostages, especially those still alive, to come home to their families, bring a small degree of tranquility to that region of the world. But I was not surprised all that much to read that there are certain members of Netanyahu's government who are threatening to bring down the government if Netanyahu actually goes ahead with this. You can probably guess who the parties are, but Bezalel Smotrich and Issachar Ben Gvir have said openly and publicly that they are prepared to collapse the government if it actually goes forward. Why? Because this has been their moment to exercise the powers that they were given in their various governmental offices to move forward their particular agendas. Each of them has indicated a desire to create in Israel a theocracy. Several years ago, before he was even elected to government, Mr. Smotrich said, "We, Orthodox Jews, all would want the state of Israel to be run according to the Torah and Jewish law. It's just that we can't because there are people who think differently from us, and we have to get along with them until we don't." Went on later, a few days later, "The government makes decisions that affect us and impedes our liberties every day. So it's simply about what decisions are in the public interest to justify coercion. We too can force our needs, our wants on others." This is not just an internal. This is how they look at the opportunity presented in Gaza and the West Bank. In 2017, Smotrich presented his decisive plan, in which he foresees flooding, simply so, the areas of Judea and Samaria with settlements and Jewish settlers. When this happens, the Palestinians are supposed to understand that they have no choice to get a state of their own, and that they would have to choose between one of three options: a life of subjugation under Israeli rule, emigration, or to become a shaheed, a martyr. And so, buried amongst everything that's going on the macro level is the allowance now to build 6,000 homes in what, until a week ago, were illegal settlements, even according to the government of Israel. And these houses, these homes, will be paid for by the Israeli government, Israelis who pay taxes. These homes will be defended by Israeli soldiers, but not necessarily people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who between the two of them served less than 6 months in the IDF. Smotrich owns all 6 months. Ben-Gvir, when he turned 18, was rejected because of his right-wing radical ideas. Their ultimate goal, stated publicly, is to restore the Torah justice system, and our country should aspire to run itself as in the days of King David. And this is said against the backdrop of a map that shows the full size of King David's empire. Are firmly convinced that they're doing the work of God. But there is not room here for religious freedom. There's not even room here for anybody who disagrees. This is not what the author of Liot Am Chofshi B'Artzenu ever envisioned. Those of you who, Rabbi, it's Israel. Let them figure it out. I can't. It bothers me too much. But for those of you who like to keep your worrying on a more local level, as a gift going into this year's celebration of Independence Day, the superintendent, the state superintendent of schools in Oklahoma, directed all public schools to teach the Bible, including the Ten Commandments. And in another quote, it says, the Bible and the Ten Commandments. Now, on one level, you could say, idiot. Last time I checked, the Ten Commandments are in the Bible, except he doesn't mean that part of the Bible. He means the other part. He wants every teacher, every classroom to have a Bible, and that the teaching from the Bible will happen in every classroom. That the Bible and the Ten Commandments are necessary because of their substantial influence on our nation's founders and the foundational principles of the Constitution, which apparently he's never read, but okay. State Superintendent Walters is a conservative Christian and has been at all sorts of controversial positions with regard to gender identity, the teaching of race, the teaching of slavery, and other inconveniences of history. He has led the attack not only against specific school districts, but even against individual teachers. And once we've got the Bible out, let's go back to prayer in public schools. Here too, we see a disregard for what it means to be a free people. It is an expectation of an open embrace of Christian values as the dominant norm in our society or in a country. We can't say it's across the sea in Israel and we shouldn't worry about it because it touches us. And we can't say it's Oklahoma and I don't live there, or it's Louisiana and I don't live there, because you have a growing national movement amongst conservatives, particularly Catholics and evangelicals, who are pushing to use exclusively Christian values as the dominant decision-making values in our society. So if we want to be a land in which freedom and liberty ring, if we want to be a people who can live chofshi b'artzeinu, free in our land, then not only do we have to be vigilant at what's happening behind the smoke screen, but we have to be particularly active in responding. I wish I had a better message, but perhaps it's appropriate that it falls during Parashat Korah, because Parashat Korah is all about the fight for legitimate authority and who actually does get to speak in the divine voice. Okay, Adkan friends, we'll turn back to our Sidurim.